Morning, everyone. Wednesday, the 6th of May, carrying on with our devotional on the book of John. And we've been looking at this question, is Jesus really God? Obviously tied to the main theme of the book of John, that Jesus is God. And this question is at the center of all of Jesus' interactions with people right throughout this book. We repeatedly see these declarations of Jesus' identity, who he is, and then people dealing with those declarations in many different ways, either believing or remaining skeptical or just outright opposing Jesus. And the same happens today. Most people don't deny that Jesus existed, do they? He's even recognized by the Muslims as a prophet and by most other religions as a holy man or one of the great religious moral teachers of all time. He's acknowledged, but in different ways other than being God. He's acknowledged as a good man, a great moral teacher, the founder of a religion, Christianity, an historically important figure, a fundamentalist, a fanatic, a fake, or simply as some dusty, outdated, and irrelevant person who lived very long ago. And Jesus knew that that would happen. It happened during his life, and it continues to happen the same way today, 2,000 years later. Most of humanity does not recognize Jesus as God, but it's precisely what Jesus asks you and I to do in the book of John and in the rest of the Gospels, even today. You see, even by saying, yes, I do recognize Jesus, he was a great man and was probably the greatest moral teacher who ever lived, is not enough. It's simply incorrect if we read the book of John or the Gospels with any understanding at all about what Jesus was saying. And it's incorrect because firstly, you're looking at Jesus in the past tense as someone who existed back then, yet he rose from the dead and is alive today. So we don't talk about the Jesus who was, because he is. And secondly, those statements of him being a great human, a great man, ignore his claim to divinity. So they basically miss the whole point of what he's trying to say. We have to ask, though, is it possible that in writing this gospel, John got it all wrong, that the other disciples got it all wrong, that Jesus somehow managed to dupe them all and they were victims, as we would be today, of one of the greatest scams of all history? Granted, yes, he lived a perfect life, and everyone acknowledges that. He taught amazing things in such a way that they still impact the world today. But that doesn't mean he's God, does it? Could he really have just been a great man? I want to read a passage from one of my favorite books, Mere Christianity by C.S. Lewis, which puts it very, very clearly. He's the author of the Narnia series. He says here, I'm trying here to prevent anyone saying the really foolish thing that people often say about him. I'm ready to accept Jesus as a great moral teacher, but I don't accept his claim to be God. That is the one thing we must not say. A man who was merely a man and said the sort of things Jesus said would not be a great moral teacher. He would either be a lunatic on a level with a man who says he is a poached egg, or else he would be the devil of hell. You must make your choice. Either this man was and is the Son of God, or else a madman or something worse. You can shut him up for a fool, you can spit at him and kill him as a demon, or you can fall at his feet and call him Lord and God. But let us not come with any patronizing nonsense about his being a great human teacher. He has not left that open to us. He did not intend to. Powerful stuff, hey? So to say that Jesus was a great human teacher is patronizing nonsense. Once we read the Bible, and for this purpose, let me say, once we read the book of John, and we start to get some insight into who Jesus himself claimed to be, we are left with only three possible options regarding him and regarding what he says. Firstly, that Jesus was a liar. If he wasn't who he claimed to be, then he was a liar. There's no alternative. He was a fake, an imposter. Quite simply, though, if he was a liar, he could under no circumstances be God, because God cannot lie. In fact, as C.S. Lewis said, he would be the devil of hell himself. But there are a few ways to eliminate this option of Jesus being a liar. Firstly, there are over 400 prophecies in the Old Testament about the first coming of the Messiah, and Jesus fulfilled them all. Prophecies like where and how he would be born, the family he'd be born into, how he would die, and so on, without going into specifics. And the probability of him fulfilling just eight of those 400 prophecies has been calculated to 1 in 1 with 18 zeros afterwards. Impossible, isn't it? Now, while it may be possible to do one or two things to fulfill some prophecies, in other words, he was supposed to go there and do that, and then you go there and do that. You have no control, however, over most of the prophecies. You can't control the date and place of your birth. Even the way you are born, you have no control of that. Roman crucifixion, for example, the way Jesus died, was impossible to fulfill on purpose. When the prophecy was made about how Jesus would die nailed to a cross, crucifixion hadn't even been invented. In fact, the Romans weren't even around. So how can you fake that? And secondly, there are very few people who would fake something, who would lie about something and then carry it through to the degree as Jesus did, that they would be brutally tortured and brutally treated and killed for it without backing down. Most people would say, okay, this is a lie, stop, it's not true. You wouldn't go through that for a lie, to support a lie. And the interesting thing is that Jesus never backed down, and neither did his disciples, who were all put to death with the exception of John, who wrote this gospel. And none of them denied Jesus through to the end of their lives. And never mind the disciples. What about the thousands of Christians who've been persecuted, tortured, martyred, and killed since then? Would they do that for a lie? There must be something that grips their hearts, that grips our hearts, that we know that this is true. And then to prove that he's not a liar, Jesus backed up his claim by performing incredible miracles beyond human capacity to perform, things that are divine. How could Jesus have done that if he was a liar? And finally, Jesus rose from the dead, just as he said he would. He rose from the dead. You can't lie about that. So there's simply no way Jesus could have faked being God. The second option, after Jesus could have been a liar, that was that Jesus was a lunatic. He was nuts, cuckoo, off his rocker. This is also an impossible scenario because mad people are by nature inconsistent and unstable, and Jesus was obviously neither. Mad people do not say the sort of things that Jesus said. They don't live the sort of way that Jesus lived. And I read a very interesting psychological profile done on the life, teaching, and character of Jesus as seen in the Bible. And the conclusion was that he was probably the most balanced person who ever lived. Lunatics are selfish, and Jesus was the epitome of selflessness. He gave himself completely, even to the point of giving his life. He never flinched, never backed down, and was unfailingly consistent throughout his life right to the end. His teachings are beautiful, flawless, and absolutely profound, hardly the ravings of a nutcase. So if we look at him, there's absolutely no way Jesus was a lunatic. So if he wasn't a liar and he wasn't a lunatic, what's the only option left? Jesus is Lord. Jesus is God. Jesus is who he claims to be. And once again, C.S. Lewis sums it up like this so beautifully. We are faced then with a frightening alternative. This man we are talking about either was and is just what he said, or else a lunatic or something worse. Now, it seems to me obvious that he was neither a lunatic nor a fiend. And consequently, however strange or terrifying or unlikely it may seem, I have to accept the view that he was and is God. God has landed on this enemy-occupied world in human form. Beautiful summary, isn't it? And that's it. It's what John is writing about in this gospel. It's about what Jesus himself claimed and wanted us to know. And it's what the disciples and many others believed. And based on what they believed, based on what they saw and understood and then believed, they started to share that belief with others all over the world. And here we are, 2,000 years on, as Christians, utterly convinced and utterly convicted that this is true. Jesus Christ is God. Wonderful, isn't it? See you tomorrow.